Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is easily a top 10 MCU movie, so here are my thoughts and review on this movie. As always, this video will contain spoilers, so if you don't want spoilers, go head over to my shorts or my TikTok and check out my one-take movie review on this movie. But without further ado, be sure to like, subscribe, comment, get your Eazy Apparel at shop.eazyapparel.com, and let's talk about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. This movie definitely lived up to the hype. This was Guardians at their very best, and there were just so many things that I just loved about this movie. This movie was emotional and truly was Rocket's story, and in my opinion, this is the best MCU movie since No Way Home. So in this movie, the High Evolutionary is after Rocket, and after a brutal attack from Adam Warlock, the Guardians must keep Rocket alive while they try to find a way to save him and stop the High Evolutionary. As always, let's start off with the good, and easily the strong point of this movie was the story. It was really emotional, and it really made Rocket the main character. All of those flashbacks were super meaningful, and they hit really hard, and it made us understand Rocket's character even more. I'll even say that this story made me appreciate parts of Guardians 1 and 2 even more. This really was a story of Rocket accepting who he is and to stop running from his past. I love that he called himself Rocket Raccoon at the end of the movie, plus it was really rewarding to see him go back and save all the animals in this movie's finale. But the way James Gunn closed out their journey together was just remarkable, and it made sense for each character. Drax stayed on nowhere and became the father figure he truly is. Mantis finally went out on her own to figure out who she is, and Peter also stopped running from his past just like Rocket and went to find his grandfather. And for Nebula, she's now rebuilding the community of Nowhere, and for Rocket, well, he became that leader that he was destined to be. And I think what made this ending so good is that even though it was sad to see this group split up and go their separate ways, each path that each character decided to take was very well deserved and fitting for their character arc throughout this entire trilogy. And also, I have to bring this up since we're talking about the characters, but the villain in this movie, the High Evolutionary, is one of the best villains in the MCU in my opinion. He was menacing and just had no redeemable qualities, and that's something I usually don't like, but in this movie, they made it work. This movie did a great job at showing that there is truly nothing the High Evolutionary won't do to achieve his goals, and I think that made him a very viable threat for the Guardians. And since this movie had this end-all be-all feel to it, you truly didn't know who was gonna die, who was gonna live, or heck, if the Guardians were even gonna be able to defeat the High Evolutionary. And next up for the good is the action, and honestly, this hands down is some of the best action I have seen in the MCU. In this movie, we got to see the Guardians at the height of their powers, which led us to seeing them use their powers in some pretty creative and cool ways. But it would be a crime if I didn't mention that hallway fight scene, because honestly, it's probably one of my top 5 MCU fight scenes now and is easily one of the best parts of this movie. This scene was a one-shot and it was absolutely beautiful. Each of the Guardians got their own little moment to shine during this scene, and that was really cool to see. As I said before, we got to see the Guardians use their powers in some new creative and unique ways, and man, this scene was a blast to watch. And honestly, I hope the MCU takes note of this and does more scenes like this in the future, because the potential of what their fight scenes could be is through the roof. And then at the very end of the movie, we got another shorter one shot where they took out the High Evolutionary and probably gave him the meanest combo I have ever seen in an MCU movie, which was very well deserved because this movie made you hate the High Evolutionary throughout it. So you wanted to see him get taken down in the worst way possible, and it delivered here at the very end. And the final good thing I have for this movie is the humor, and it was just great. This movie was hilarious. And usually in Marvel movies, the humor drowns out the more serious parts, but this movie didn't do that. I thought the humor was well timed, and it didn't take away from the more serious moments either. It was funny, and the chemistry between the cast just made it that much better. James Gunn knew when and when not to use the humor, and it just worked perfectly in my opinion. Alright, now let's get into the so-so. And as I said before, there was one character that I didn't think had the best arc and really wasn't the best in this movie, and sadly that is Adam Warlock. Now overall, I did like Adam Warlock in this movie, but I definitely wasn't expecting him to be the way he was in this movie. He's this all-powerful being in the comics, and in this movie, he just wasn't that. He was kind of more of a joke. Now in the beginning of this movie, I thought he was gonna be that all-powerful being because he picked apart the Guardians pretty easily, and I thought he was gonna serve as maybe like a secondary villain until he like eventually joined the team. But after that initial introduction to him, he was pretty much played off as a joke, and yes, I thought some of these jokes were funny, but I just thought we would get more out of the character of Adam Warlock. And also, I felt like his story was kind of incomplete. Now, yes, he does get that redeemable second chance from the Guardians, but when his mother died earlier in the movie, I thought he would go after the High Evolutionary and take him on in some way or sort of fashion, but they never really did anything with that, and I think there was a little bit left on the table there, but that's just my opinion. And finally, let's get into the bad. Now, honestly, there wasn't much bad in this movie. This movie was phenomenal, but Marvel movies do have the tendency to fall into putting too much or too many characters into their movie, and sadly, this movie kind of does the same thing. You really see this happen with characters like Adam Warlock and Kraglin. Now, there were times in this movie where I genuinely forgot that they were in the movie because we spend so much time away from them at some points during this film. Now, yes, I get this is a Guardians film and they're not the main focus, but if we could have sprinkled them in a little bit more, gave them a little bit more of a role, I think it would have helped. Now, necessarily, I don't think this took away from the movie by any means. It's just something I noticed and I had to point out. But all in all, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is a great movie. It's got action, humor, and a heartfelt story with lots of emotion. It sends all its characters off in the right way and easily has a place in my top 10 MCU movies. Those are my thoughts on Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Let me know what you thought of the movie down in the comments, and as always, be sure to like, subscribe, comment, get your Eazy Apparel at shopeasyapparel.com. God bless, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.